everyone. This is your classical podcast, Pianolin TV. This is your host, Alexander Bowie, and Jeremy Au is our co-host. Today, we have a special edition of Rutgers University Mason Gross School of the Arts because there are three of us that are currently attending or just graduated. Jeremy just graduated. I and our special guest here, Margarita Rovenskaya, are both in our doctoral program in the classical piano at Mason Gross. Welcome, Rita. Rita is a wonderful pianist, and she was born in Ukraine, and she began to study the piano at age of 6 in Chicago. She earned her bachelor in music in piano performance at Oberlin Conservatory in May 2012, and her master's in piano studies at New York University in May 2014, where she also served as adjunct piano faculty. She's based in New York, where she performs and enjoys teaching, and she is the head of the piano department at Newark School of the Arts and is a piano faculty at several studio schools and summer festivals. Wow, that's a mouthful to say, but huge accomplishments coming from the great pianist here, Margarita Rovenskaya, with us today. And she is going to talk about life after graduation, where we go to school, college, so many classes, taking lessons, playing music, but where does that lead us to? And so many musicians just like us wonder, there's too many of us, how are we gonna make it? And Rita's here to answer that question.
Oh gosh, I don't know if I can answer that question. I can just share what I've kind of gathered in my own experience. But also, thank you for having me. You guys are both amazing. This is so cool that you're doing this, and it's really awesome. I think this is like a good, step after school, right? Just like having a podcast and talking about these issues. It's already like a really awesome thing to do.
Definitely.
Yeah, you talked about like all these schools that we all go to and like all the things that we build for our conservatory. And I think like kind of one of the biggest things that's missing is just like kind of how to function in the real world, because I think we're all taught how to play our instrument and like how to become these great artists and like how to use all these skills that we learn in our piano lessons and like, just like really reach our highest musical potential. And I think we all graduate with that knowledge and we like know what we need to work on in order to become better musicians, but like we don't really know how to function as musicians and members of society as well. And I think that's something that we all kind of learn the second we graduate. And I'm still in school, obviously, but I think that I took 3 years off between my master's and my DMA, and I think those were pretty educational years because I remember graduating from my master's and I was just like, oh my gosh, like now what? I don't have a job, I don't have anything. Like, how am I going to pay rent. And I think I just started thinking about all of the avenues that what's possible, like what is possible for a musician, right? Like we can teach, we can perform, we can collaborate, we can create our own projects. It all seems very like there's no opportunities, but when you start to think about all the skills that we've honed, then we can use those skills in order to create our own opportunities and our own jobs. And so I think we need to be very proactive as musicians when we graduate. So yeah, I mean, I think that like in my experience, I was just like immediately desperate to have students because I was like, okay, I don't have a studio. Like I was teaching completely at NYU and like my entire schedule was, all NYU students. And then those 20 hours of work disappeared and I was like, okay, like I have to get a job. So I think, and this goes for, I think, just like teaching and performing. I just started like doing a lot of research, just like gathering information, like what are other people doing? Like where are they teaching? What schools would hire me or are looking for young professionals like me? Like what kind of opportunities are other people our age who like aren't winning the big, we're not Zhang, even though we want to be. So like, how can we function in a world where we're not winning competitions all the time? So I think that it was just like, for me, I was just like immediately thinking of practical ways to survive. So I started applying to a lot of jobs. And I think that like, yeah, I mean, I was looking at job descriptions, but I think that the main thing was just like me researching schools and like figuring out which schools were hiring, which schools weren't, and thinking of projects. But even before you start doing that, I think like the biggest thing that we are not taught, and actually one of the most important classes that I took at NYU was the last semester colloquy class where they talk about preparing your material. And I think that those are even more important than like, gathering information about jobs and opportunities is also good, but you need to build up your website, have a good CV, present your resume really well, know how to spin and like market yourself, really like brand yourself to wherever job you're applying. So I think those are really important things to start with.
You mentioned that you took 3-year gap after your master.
Yeah.
When you were doing your master, what did you vision yourself as doing after graduation, and why did you decide to do DMA?
That's a great question. Okay, so when I did my master's, I moved to New York in order to do my master's, and that was like a very, I went to school in Oberlin, which like if anyone who has not been to Oberlin, it's like a tiny school in the Midwest in like the middle of a bunch of cornfields, and it was amazing. I loved it so much, and I was like so busy, and it was this amazing musical bubble. But like, I didn't have to work hard because everything was there. Professionally, I mean, I had to work hard at my instrument and all the classes and courses, but I didn't have to like survive. So I think that when you move to New York, it's like you're like thrown into this thing where like everyone is hustling, right? Everyone's working hard all the time. When I went into the master's, I just wanted to get better at my instrument, right? Like that was just like I was just practicing. All my free time was just practice and teaching, because the master's came with an adjunct faculty position, which I was really lucky to have. And so I gained a lot of teaching experience. And so I was just like honing my skills and like trying to learn as much as I could. And then, sorry, what was the question you were asking about why I took a 3-year gap?
So why did you decide to take a DMA?
Yeah. Well, okay, first of all, I took time off because I graduated my master's and I just felt like I wasn't ready to go into the DMA. I always knew that I would go. And actually, when I graduated from my bachelor's, I was like, okay, I'm just going to like follow the path. I went to my bachelor's, master's, DMA, like nonstop. I was like, this is going to be fine. And then I was doing the master's and I was like, I think that we have this mentality. Like when I graduated my bachelor's, I was like, okay, I'm prepared for the world. I'm a good pianist. And then I get to master's and I was like, okay, I know nothing and I'm a terrible pianist. It's this like shift of like working in more detail and like thinking about how, thinking about your craft more. And so I think when I graduated my master's, I was like, okay, I need a little bit more time for like these concepts to settle. And I think I want to like experience a little bit of the world before I go into my DMA, and also prepare, because I think that I was just coming out of this like very intense master's program where I learned so much. And I feel like, that was like really formative years of my life. And I think that I was always thinking about the DMA and like always thinking about how I can prepare for it, but I wanted my program to be really ready. So like I was still taking lessons with my private teacher from NYU at Terry, and I was thinking about where I was going to study. And I just wanted to like get teaching experience before I did that. And I started teaching. And I was like teaching at like 6 different schools in the city. I was like, I don't know what I was doing. It was like crazy. I was just like, I need a job. So it was like exciting because I got to experience all these different things. And like the students were, they were great. It was awesome to like work with so many different kids. But I think that I was just like, my students were so spread out throughout the city, and I was like traveling so much. And they were all like, on a similar track where they were like learning music in order to be music lovers, but not necessarily learn piano on a higher level. And I was thinking, okay, like, I think that the only way, for me at least, that I think that I could teach students on a higher level was to like get a higher level degree, which is sort of unfortunate, right? In our world, like we're already masters and we still have to get an even higher degree. And I was thinking like, okay, like if I want the opportunity to teach at a university or a conservatory, like I need to go get my DMA. And yeah, I think that like the first 2 years was really just like me learning how to teach young children, how to teach the beginner level, how to like really develop a method to understand, and then like, how to develop my own projects and like create my own concerts. And then I was like, okay, I think that I've done this like freelance life for a little bit. I need to go back to school and get my DMA. So I think that like, that was just like, I need to teach. If I wanted to teach on a higher level, that was the reason. Yeah.
So is your goal to become a professor at university or conservatory?
I'm glad you asked that, because I think when people ask me what my goal is, it's one of the goals, but I think that like, because there's so many opportunities and so many things that I want to do, it's like one of the goals. Like, yes, that's something I'm definitely working towards, but I also understand that it's extremely competitive. And like, I'm going to keep a very open mind. I haven't entered the job market at all yet, but like, I think that kind of thing is like, it's something that I'm going to do and I'm working towards, but I'm also not going to let it like, I have so many other things that I'm doing that I'm also excited about. So it's like part of this big wreath of things that I think we all as musicians need to work towards. Yeah.
Mhm. And you and Alex are kind of in the same position. You're both about
Definitely.
to graduate the
Yep.
DMA. How about Alex? What do you see yourself doing?
Yeah, I would love to hear your
year or
answer.
so?
Oh, you're putting the host on the spot here. I see. All right. That's fine. That's fine. It is. I actually, I followed a different path from Rita here. I actually
Yeah.
went straight into DMA.
Yeah,
after
you
my
followed my
master's.
original plan.
But honestly, I was a little bit anxious and nervous to enter. And like you, I actually wanted to work after my master's to actually experience life and enter the real world. But I had many musicians and friends, family members tell me, once you get out of school, it's gonna get pretty difficult to get back in.
I
And that
heard
thing
that
just
too.
like
It
went
is
into my
difficult.
head all the time. And I didn't know what to do. So what I did was I just applied to DMA just for the heck of it.
Yeah.
And I got accepted to several. And I said, you know what? I'm just gonna give this a shot. If I don't like it, then fine. But I
Yeah.
stuck with it. It was actually very rigorous. Transferring from a conservatory for 6 years and then going to a university life setting was a drastic change. New York City to New Jersey. Um, as you guys may or may not know, New Jersey is called the Garden State. So it's filled with trees and big spacious lands. I mean, depending on north or south, north is a little bit more industrious and a lot more compact than the south. The south is a lot more spacious, beaches, casinos. One of the famous landmarks there is Atlantic City. So I just went with the flow, and I actually was glad to go to my DMA and still am, because I get to meet you two, Jeremy
Yeah.
and Margarita here. And it's just the experience of meeting like-minded people, going for a degree and enjoying music and trying to build a community together, which is, what MSM had when I went. And I was trying to do the same thing at Rutgers, although everyone was about like commuting. So it also built my independence. Just because I don't have someone with me doesn't mean I can't do anything. And that's actually where I really learned how to grow up, be my own self and make my own decision for real, like being by myself and no one being around you. You can't ask your roommate for help, which I didn't have. Like I used to live with a roommate in the same room, and we would always talk. So when I lived in a single room, and I'm kind of like, surrounded, like with just my stuff. And it actually made me independent. And what, going back to Jeremy's question, what do I plan to do after my DMA? Very similar to Rita here. I also want to use this degree as opportunity to teach in college or conservatory, but options are open, really. Being a musician, especially a pianist, there's so many different pathways you can take, and you should never set your goal with just one. You should always be open, because if that one fails, you don't want to feel so terrible. You worked so hard to get it and you never really achieved it.
Yeah, I think also, like, just to add on to what you're saying, I think like when you get a DMA, it's a little bit of a different experience than getting like a master's or bachelor's, because your time is not as consumed by school. And I think like even just like, my original plan was to like dive right into the DMA, but I think, and exactly what you did, but I think that you found opportunities and like ways to build your life while being in school, which I think is, it's nice that the DMA allows for that freedom and it allows for us to work at the same time as being in school. Yeah. I think honestly, like, sorry to interrupt. I just think that, like, I was just going to say that I think a DMA kind of sets you up for a practical, at least at Rutgers, like my experience, especially with like my teacher, Vladimir, is like he's always so full of like practical wisdom. And it's really nice to hear that. And just like the entire like mental of like functioning in the real world, because it's the final degree, right? It's the degree that you go to school and you don't really go to school after that. So I think that that's kind of nice to like gather the tools that you can while you're there in order to like learn how to enter the workforce. Yeah.
Well, I think it's nice that as a musician you can do different things. You can teach, you can perform, you can do some other things, but with the DMA, I think it opens up more choices. And now there's a lot of things that you cannot do without a DMA because it's getting much more competitive. And I heard that to teach at a college, university, conservatory, you have to have a DMA these days, unless you're, exception, So I think it's great.
Yeah, Rita, how has COVID actually affected you during all of this planning? Like, were you planning to graduate earlier, or was this kind of still in your mindset even if as COVID was happening to you? Well, to all of us, really.
That's a great question. I mean, obviously, it's been like a very difficult year, and like it's really, really hard for everyone. I think with the world situation, and also with like musicians losing the opportunity to perform, and all so many things coming to a standstill, especially with all the tragedy around us. But like aside from all that and all the emotions that we were feeling, like musically, it was a very productive time for me. Like kind of the opposite side of things, because I had this lecture recital to prepare for. And I honestly think that like, I had a lot of projects planned for the year. And I remember like in the beginning of 2020, I had played like a solo recital, a chamber recital, a four-hands recital, and I was like planning all these other things, and like was supposed to learn this like big flute program, and I was like feeling so overwhelmed. I was like, oh my gosh, I just need a break, and it's only February. And then everything shut down, and I was like, great, I can work on my paper, So like, of course, it was awful and horrible. I think like definitely took an emotional. I think we're all recovering from like trauma. I think some form of it in some way, but I think musically it was just like, okay, like, I have all this time, and the library was so great about like sending books, they could just like request books and they just mailed it to my house. So I was like, I have all these books now that I need to return, but I have these like piles of books about Czech history and about Dvorak. And I was just like reading and doing research and like learning my program. And I had all this, I stopped commuting all over the city like an insane person, and I was just like at home. We were all online teaching, which is like a blessing and a curse at the same time. And I think that it just like it made some room for me to like really have time to practice and like practice in detail. I think another big thing that came out of the pandemic for all of us is that we had to record ourselves, right? Either we had to listen back to it and submit to our teachers, but I think that just recording myself was like a big teacher for me, because it forced me to listen to myself all the time. And before, my teacher's always encouraging, like record yourself, like listen back, see what you like. And I never had the patience for it. I was like, oh, I don't want to hear myself play. But now you kind of have to, right? So I sort of used like Instagram as my my holding myself accountable for that, and just like sending videos to my teacher. But I think that was like a big part of my musical development this year. Yeah, it was just like the extra time really motivated me. And I know it wasn't like that for everyone. I think a lot of people felt extremely discouraged, and I don't want to take away from that because it was such a hard time. But I think that because I had a project in mind, and because like I created that deadline for myself, that like really forced me to work. And I presented the lecture recital last month, which was like really exciting, and like I finished the paper, which was also like a big thing. And sometimes I wonder if like things hadn't gone into lockdown, if I would still be writing the paper. So yeah, yeah, I think
wow,
that
so it's certain circumstances that
yeah,
unexpected
yeah,
actually gave you leeway and another chance for you to actually focus
right,
on your
yeah,
degree. You're I feel like you were doing so many things that
I
you
am.
needed something to tell you, calm down and focus
Exactly,
on your degree.
exactly, yeah,
And it happened.
absolutely, yeah.
And I'm
I mean,
actually so
unfortunately,
happy for you.
I mean, it was like a horrible traumatic world event, but yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Well, for your
I think,
personal, you
yeah,
got your goal of writing that paper, which is not easy.
totally. No, it's not. I think that this whole, I don't know, I think that this whole pandemic has been kind of eye-opening for like freelancers and for musicians, because I think we've all become very protective of our time and our commuting time. And I think like, we don't want to go back to that old life. And so I think it's interesting to see how things will change based on this.
Yeah, and something interesting that you've been still doing, and you're probably gonna still do it after, is you actually have your own Instagram interviews.
I do,
Could you
yeah.
tell us a little bit more about
Sure.
that?
Sure. So I started those last year, in July of last year. And it's actually, so I learned my program and I was like, okay, I have to write this paper. And I started researching all these things. And I was like, okay, there are so many DMAs out there that many of my friends who are like DMAs and they've graduated and they have presented these topics and then they never talk about them again. And I was like, okay, I need to study for comps and like know about all this different music. I might as well ask them to like present it so I can learn about it and so everyone else can learn about it. So I just started interviewing my friends. I think like we've talked about a lot of different topics. We've talked about like there was a great interview on Bolivian music and like Black African American Black female composers. And there was like an interview, there's coming up an interview about Mexican composers that I'm really excited about. It's like music from all parts of the world, which has been really exciting. Or like, specific approaches to a piece. Like one of my friends did a talk about most received pictures at an exhibition. And it was so fun to like hear him go through all the movements and like talk about how he practices it. Like, just like pick his brain a little bit. I think that's also fun to see like how people, approach the thought process of presenting a specific piece or talking about composers or, it can even be sometimes people talk about like efficient practice or like how to survive in the real world. I think there was like a friend on Instagram who gave a great talk about just like having a growth mindset and like always thinking about what's next and like setting yourself up for success instead of putting yourself down. So it's just been interesting to hear, like, first of all, to connect with so many people and like network. That's also been like really awesome to see what pianists all around me are doing. Not necessarily pianists too, like sprinklers and other instruments also, but it's just like nice to see like what we were doing even in a pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah, just to recap everything, and Rita, you've been doing so much. Like
I
it's
know.
like you're like all over the place.
Yeah.
And not everyone has that lifestyle that you've had.
Sorry.
And some of them are probably like in their shell, like in their shelter, their home, and they literally
Yeah.
just practice and then they just go home and they don't really see anybody. But
Yeah.
being something or that career that you want, or you not even sure what you want after graduation, it actually requires you to do something during the process of school. You can't
Yeah.
just do your thing, practice, get lessons, sleep, practice, recycle, and then after graduation, just start looking for a job. What Rita here did was a number of things. She got a lot of in-person experience. She went out of her way, out of her degree requirements to teach, which is what she wants to do in the future, be a teacher. But also she also did other things that are fun, which also helped her build herself up to be a great musician that she is today. And from just interviewing with you and also just knowing you in real life, that you have a very positive and happy mindset at most of the times. Every time I see you, you're like, hey, how's it going? And with this the big smile on your face, sometimes it's bigger than mine.
Life is good, y'all. Life is okay.
And I think you're despite all the negativity or stuff that's been thrown at you, you still have a very positive and happy mindset. And I think that's what drove you, or is driving you to success, even after this podcast is being aired and after you graduate. Life after graduation is scary, but it is really up to you what you do with your time during school.
Yeah, I just want to add that, I think I'm an anomaly with my positivity. Like, not everyone is like this. And I think that, my only advice is just to pick one thing that you can do, that you can focus on, and just work towards that one thing first. Even if it's building your website, because I think that's a really useful tool. It's having a strong website, or building your resume, or focusing on planning a project. I think just pick one. I think that's already a big step forward.
Yeah, and speaking after life after graduation, one of us has already graduated and actually pursuing a full-time career. Jeremy here, just give brief on us again. Your thoughts. Were you thinking about all of this, before you were graduating?
No, I wasn't really thinking about anything when I was in school, but first I started as a non-major, non-music in Rutgers, and then I switched over to the music program. So when I first entered, I wasn't planning to become a musician at all. And then now after I graduate, I got a full-time position at a company, and also I teach on the side. So now I'm able to do both. Thank you. Both music and non-music, and I guess that's a very good balance for me. So I guess you don't know what's going to happen. I guess you just keep going with what you get, and sometimes the result is good. And
that's amazing. Congratulations. It's really great. Yeah, that's really cool.
I feel like Jeremy has, it seems like to the outside world, he's like, yeah, just do this and this. Oh, okay, I have a full-time job now. I'm done. Not many of us are lucky just to go with the flow, but it does teach us a lesson. Really go with the flow. Where life takes you, you've heard of the saying, don't swim upstream, but just go with the, how the river flows. And sometimes that helps. You don't want to fight against something that, is going to be a harsh struggle. But sometimes it is good. Sometimes it is good. But thank you so much, Margarita, for your insight. Also, Jeremy, too. We're speaking about life after graduation. You've seen two different examples. You can say three, me.
Definitely three.
But three different people here, and three different lives. Really, no one has the same life, even if they're pursuing the same career. You can see Rita and me. We're both classical pianists, but we do different things. We do different things outside practicing piano, and it shows. And that means that there's no one formula for success or finding that exact thing you want after graduation. Life is full of surprises, and take it in as you go. Rita, before we let you go, how would you like for people to contact you if they have any questions or they want to watch your IG interviews?
Yeah, you can see me on Instagram, or if you have any questions, you can email me. I'm happy to answer. If you have any, I can help. I'm happy to help.
She's a wonderful person as well as a musician, y'all. And I'm so happy that you're able to give us and our listeners.
Thanks for inviting me. It's awesome to be here.
Of course. This is the end of the episode of Life After Graduation. This is Pianolin TV, your classical podcast with host Alexander Bowie and Jeremy Au. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. Links are below for social medias. And if you're not watching, if you're listening on our podcast platforms, follow us. Every Tuesday, there's going to be new content, probably new guests, and always valuable information that you probably can't get elsewhere on a classical music podcast. So make sure to follow us, Pianolin TV, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.